How many have bow experience? I saw a few of you warming up. Wonderful. Even if you don't have bow experience, it's okay. And if you do have bow experience, understand something really important. There are many ways to use the bow. What I mean by that is there's basic techniques with the bow, obviously, that were used in combat situations that are useful and practical. But there are some styles that have high stances with the bow. There are some that have lower. There are some that have specific techniques that might be different. For example, on a downward strike, there are some systems that use the armpit to stop the bow. So it would look like this. In my system, we stop it at the belt, like this. So almost like chamber position, okay? Okay, but there's a few things that I consider extremely important about the bow that we really should understand, okay? Does anybody have any questions before we continue? Okay. And the fact that I competed in over 700 tournaments and was very successful, that's beside the point, because when I teach the bow, I teach about the practical aspect. What can you do with the bow to make you successful in a real battle? Okay. I see these people in terms, they throw the bow up in the air, they spin around, they catch behind it. That's all nonsense to me, okay? You would never do that in a real fight. So and it's maybe flashy and people think it's cool and there's some athletic ability in that, that's great, but I think the bow should be used as an instrument to save your life. And as we all know, if you don't have an actual bow, but you have the training, you could pick up something and substitute for the bow, okay? Things we have in our home and so forth. So the way you hold the bow is extremely important, okay? In most of the bow forms that I have learned and teach, the bow is held this way, okay? Generally speaking, okay? Everything I say is going to be generally speaking. You hold the bow like this, left hand, right hand. There's a reason for that, okay? So it's very unusual to have your hands in the same position. Very unusual. So you want your hands in opposite positions like this. Typically, when we are in a front stance, and again, the front stance could be low, it could be high, it doesn't really matter that much. The downward strike is performed this way. So if everybody faces the same way as I am, it's probably a little bit easier, like this. Okay? Notice which foot is forward. That's by design. Because if you have your left foot forward, this can happen. You can hit yourself and injure yourself. To me, it doesn't make sense to have this foot forward and do a downward strike, okay? So this is the downward strike. Now, one of the things that I see in competition on downward strikes, and I'm not going to pick on anybody, I'm not going to say, oh, you're doing that, is this. Can anybody see what I did wrong or what's wrong with this? It may look good, but it's bad. Look where my thumb is. It's on top of the bow. Could you be the person that I want you to use a rising block. Watch what would happen in a real combat situation if I have my hand in this position. Watch. Why did that happen? Because we all know, you learn the basic self-defense technique. If somebody grabs your wrist, what do? You turn and pull. Why is that technique successful? Because the thumb is the weakest part of the grip. That's no different now. So if the thumb is on top of the bow and I'm using tremendous amount of force and they block it, or even if I hit them in the head, I get hit with my own bow. So the hand, on a downward strike, the hand should be on top of the bow on a downward strike. So you need to roll the wrist as, okay? I find that to be the most common mistake that people make with the bow on a downward strike. Because you're not hitting anything. I have nothing here to stop the bow, so that looks good. But again, it's only on the downward strike. If I do a cross cut, now the bow is here. And again, I see this a lot of times with the thumb there. if I ever hit anything, my hand's going to come off the bow. It's okay. Now, I could teach at least 4 different traditional bow kata. I'm going to find out what the majority of you would like to learn. Even if you don't learn the whole thing, at least you're going to learn a lot of it. Okay, Yonegawa no kon. I'm going to just kind of show you a little bit of it. No, just watch. I want you to tell me which one. The first, the second, the third, or the fourth. Yonegawa no kon starts like this. It slides down, block, strike, 1, 2, and then we do these full sequence techniques 3 times in the bow form. That's Yonegawa no kon. Matsuhiga no kon. We start out a little different. It's a little bit more involved. We do cross cut around the back, cross cut. Then we do tai sabaki. These are dirt flicks to the opponent's face, throwing dirt and so on. I'm just showing you a little bit, of course. Then we have Sushi no kon sho, which is bow, present the bow, take your hand away, turn slightly. Sushi no kon sho, bow, present. Horse stance, 1, 2. Leaning stance, front stance, don't step, just a slight adjustment with the left foot. No step forward. This is the only time we, see there are variations. I'll explain variations in a moment. Okay, so we do this move. Now we're going to turn around. When we turn around, move your right foot in order to achieve that. And overhead strike, circle block, and then left meets right, and you bring that bow over to perhaps block. And now we use the sequence where we do step, step, circle block. Repeat, step, step, circle block. One more time, variation. Okay, now left foot moves, block, strike. After the block and strike, you're going to take a big step with your right foot, push the bow toward the attacker, lift the bow up high, downward strike, upward strike, downward strike, figure 8, strike, circle block. Now what we just did, we're going to repeat. We're going to repeat it. We're just going to turn around and do this. When we turn around, we just slightly turn. So now our body's parallel to this wall. Block, strike. Push the bow, overhead strike. Do the whole thing. Upward strike, downward strike, figure 8, circle block. Move your left foot, block, strike. Push the bow toward the attacker, overhead strike, slide the bow, back to a front stance, moving your left foot, cross over, big circle block, wind up, horse stance, strike parallel to the floor. Okay, so that's what we just did. And now we're going to do the last part of the form. Back toward the front, because that's where we started, right foot forward. So we went from horse stance back to here, one more block, one more strike, one more slide, and the final circle block. Come back and return the bow and bow. Okay, if anybody has a question at any point, please don't hesitate to just say, I have a question. Okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
When we do the circular block, is there something we should be doing with our rear hand to make the circular block a little more effective?
Oh.
I feel like when I'm doing the circular block, my DN is doing the circular.
Okay. All right. I mean, any question I consider a good question, but there are some questions that are outstanding. Okay, that was an outstanding one. When you use the circle block, the back of the bow should not be moving around like this. Okay? And again, my opinion is, if you're going to use a circle block, how can you make it the best it can be or the most powerful, the most effective. I have found that you need to use the strength of your bicep. Okay? You need to use the strength of your bicep. If all you're doing is this, and I see this sometimes, and I'm not criticizing anybody here that might do it, but when I see this, I don't see that being as strong as that. I just don't, because you're not using your bicep. You're just doing this with your arm, and I realize you have a bow in your hand, but that's not the same as this. And we proved that a little while ago when I grabbed the bow, and the move caused me to let go. Okay? So, but the back, see, if I have this hand here, and I'm only moving my right arm, then the back of the bow should not be moving around, okay? I stabilize it, okay? Now, in this particular form, there are no cross cuts like that, but a cross cut, you want to stabilize the bow as well. You don't want it out here. You want the bow to be close to the body. So same thing here. The bow on your left side is close to the body, circle block. Ready? Sushi no kon sho. Bow. Present. Bring it over. Let go. We're going to just slightly turn and get into a deep stance. Just kind of lower the center of gravity. Come back with the left hand to the bow. And we're going to take a step back with the left as we raise the bow up high. Downward strike. Now again, if your stance is a little higher, that's okay. It's the basic technique that matters, not your stance so much. Okay, now we're going to go horse stance. Strike behind you, and then strike to the front. Okay, let's just do that real quick, and then we'll move right along. Okay, bow, present. Bring the bow, take your hand away, turn, bring your hand back to the bow, lift, step back, downward strike. On all the downward strikes, I teach always aim for the same target. In other words, pretend like, let's say this is the target on the wall, okay? I want the bow to end up there. I don't want one here, one there, because you're not showing consistency. Okay, so here we are, downward strike, horse stance, 1, 2. Now, this is leaning stance. Push the bow toward the attacker, turn around and block, overhead strike, circle block. Left foot meets right and block. Step, step, strike, circle block. Again. And now the variation, circle block. Okay. Move your left foot, low block, strike the attacker's foot. Could also be to the shin. And now we're going to push the attacker away from us by taking a big step with the right foot. Okay? And now we're going to use what we call the volley. The volley. I actually have an extra bow. I didn't want to use it because it's not traditional bow. It's my silver bow. But since she didn't have a bow, I do the Lone Ranger theme. I use this, and I call this a silver bowlet, if anybody knows the Lone Ranger. Okay, so we push the bow toward the attacker. 1, 2, 3, around, hit, circle, block, leaning stance again as we turn to the opposite direction. Block, strike, push the bow toward the attacker. Repeat the full sequence here, the full volley. And then circle block at the end of the volley. We're going to now move the left foot to meet the right and face the front wall. And the bow is on the right side. I made a mistake. My apology. See what the silver bow did to me? It made me make a mistake. So after we do this, okay, we do this. Block, strike, push the bow toward the attacker, slide, back, cross over, big circle, wind up, take a step with the left, parallel to the floor technique. And now we're going to finish. Well, it's a horse stance, by the way. Kibadachi, okay? So we're like this. Again, if you're a little higher in the stance, that's not the issue. It's just, this is the technique, okay? Then we go back for the final sequence. Okay, right foot forward, overhead hit. Slide the bow, final part, and back. Okay. So that's the form. I just want to point out that I'm not suggesting that anybody modify this form, but some of my students have, and even at times, you know, when you're in an open tournament, you can do just about anything, and if the judges like it, they'll give you a good score. But what I like about this bow form is it's easy to modify. Now, I'll give you a quick example. If I'm doing, let's say, the beginning of the form, okay, I just did this part, and then it's the traditional is to do this, block, and then like this. You could always, if you decide, you could do various techniques. When you turn around and hit, you can also add something like this, because that is traditional. In one of the bow forms I was going to teach today, the figure 8 move is traditional. It does intimidate and it does keep an opponent away. So I'm not really doing anything that's outrageous. It's just a matter of, it's up to you. But I like the traditional bow forms because of the practical aspect of it. Remember, changing the dynamics of a situation is key. If I'm going to get carjacked, my car is where that table is. Come up behind me. Tell me, get in the car, drive, and okay, look. I got a bad. Oh! What's he going to do? Run away. There's probably a 90% or better chance that you will survive. Worst thing you can do is get in the car. Of course, they're going to promise you don't try anything. I won't hurt you. Yeah, they won't hurt you until they get what they want. You know, get money at the ATM, whatever they're looking for. So the worst thing you can do, if you can avoid, is get in the car. That's one. You can faint. You can pretend you're having a stroke, heart attack. Worst case scenario, they might take your keys and your car, but you can replace those. Okay, so that was a basic message about changing the dynamics. Okay, so if you don't have a bow, you can use a figure 8. Let's just practice the figure 8 move for a moment. So, sometimes it's done with 2 hands, like this, or 1. But even though it's not in this bow form, I think it's something that's practical and should be. Where would you grab the bow? I grab it just off center. So if the center is where my hand is right now, I go just off center, and I let the weight of the bow actually, see? Nice. And it doesn't have to be fast right now. When you're learning it, just let the weight of the bow, because all I'm doing with my hand is this, making a figure 8. I'm not moving my arm like this. I'm moving my hand very little, okay? And I'm not gripping it tightly, by the way. If you notice, my thumb and forefinger are probably doing all the work here, okay? I feel like the more I learn, the less I can practice what I know, so I'd rather have fewer kata and be better at it. That's my philosophy. Maybe some of you share that with me. That's okay if you don't. But the most important thing is to be serious about your training. Get yourself a bow at some point, and that way you can train at home. And maybe some of you will be competing at an upcoming tournament, maybe like Mr. Bernard's tournament, because I usually officiate at that tournament. So anyway, that's about it. Did anybody have a last-minute question before we bow out? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for your opportunity for me to be here, and best wishes to all of you. Bow. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Oh, glad you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Please don't forget to like and subscribe to Live Dandy.